I thought I knew the man I slept next to for 12 years. I didn't. The person I built a life with, the person I trusted with every part of me, didn't exist. Not the way I believed he did. And when I finally saw the truth, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just a name on a piece of paper that didn't match the one I'd been saying out loud for over a decade. That's when everything I thought was mine started to disappear. My home, my savings, my sense of reality. He thought I wouldn't notice, or maybe he thought I'd be too broken to do anything about it. He was wrong, because the same documents that destroyed me became the only weapon I needed. My name is Rachel. I'm 37 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. Not in some grand, exciting way, just in the quiet, dependable way most people hope for. I had a job I was good at, a house I'd helped pay for, and a marriage that felt like solid ground beneath my feet. I'm a financial analyst. I work with spreadsheets, tax documents, audits. I notice patterns. I catch discrepancies. It's what I do for a living. And somehow I missed everything happening right in front of me. My husband's name was Michael, or at least that's what I called him. We met in our mid-20s at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was charming in an understated way, not flashy, not the loudest person in the room. But when he talked to you, he made you feel like you were the only person who mattered. I fell for that. I fell for him. We got married 2 years later. No big wedding. Just something simple at a courthouse, then dinner with close friends. He said he didn't care about the ceremony. He cared about the life we'd build together. I believed him. For 12 years, I believed everything he told me. We didn't have children. We talked about it early on, but Michael always said he wanted to wait until we were more secure. Then it became, let's wait until we've paid down more of the mortgage. Then it was, maybe we're better off just the two of us. I didn't push. I trusted his judgment. I trusted him. Our life was routine. We both worked. We came home. We had dinner together most nights. Weekends were for errands, maybe a movie, sometimes drinks with friends. It wasn't thrilling, but it was ours. I thought we were building something that would last. I didn't notice when things started shifting, or maybe I did, and I explained it away. About 2 years ago, Michael started traveling more for work. He was in sales, so it wasn't completely unusual. But the trips became longer, more frequent. He'd leave on a Tuesday and not come back until Friday. Sometimes he'd extend it through the weekend. When I asked about it, he'd sigh and say the client demanded FaceTime, that the company was pushing him hard, that if he didn't put in the hours now, we'd regret it later. I didn't question it. I thought he was working for us. Then there were the finances. Michael handled most of our joint accounts. I made good money, but he always said he'd take care of the bigger picture. Mortgage payments, investment accounts, property taxes. He was organized, methodical. I had access to everything, technically, but I didn't check. Why would I? I trusted him. About 8 months ago, I started noticing small things. Mail that used to come to the house stopped coming. I'd ask Michael about it, and he'd say he switched us to paperless to be more eco-friendly. That made sense. I didn't think twice. He started getting phone calls he'd take in another room. When I asked who it was, he'd say it was work. A difficult client, his boss, something boring and forgettable. One night, I walked into his office while he was on his laptop. He closed it the second I came in, not slowly, not casually. He snapped it shut like I'd caught him doing something wrong. I laughed it off. I asked if he was watching something embarrassing. He smiled and said he was just dealing with work stuff that would bore me to tears. I believed him. Because I always believed him. The breaking point came 3 months ago. I was at work, going through my own financial documents because I was applying for a credit card with better rewards. Simple, routine stuff. I needed to pull my credit report to make sure everything was in order. That's when I saw it. A mortgage. On a property I didn't recognize. Listed under my name. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Some clerical error. But I kept reading. The address was in another state. The loan had been taken out 4 years ago. My name was on it. My credit had been used. But I had never seen the paperwork. I had never signed anything. At least I didn't think I had. I sat at my desk staring at the screen, my hands shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I kept refreshing the page, thinking the information would change, that it would correct itself. It didn't. I called the mortgage company during my lunch break. I tried to keep my voice steady, professional. I told them I was calling about a loan under my name and needed to verify some details. The representative pulled up my account. She confirmed the address. the loan amount, the payment history. Everything was current. No missed payments. I asked her when the loan was originated. She told me the exact date. 4 years ago. July. I remembered that month. Michael and I had gone on a weekend trip to the coast. It was one of the few times he'd taken off work without complaining about it. He'd been relaxed, happy. He'd told me he loved me more times that weekend than he had in months. I asked the representative if there was any way I could see the original documents. She said she could email them to me. I gave her my personal email, not the one Michael had access to. When I hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot and stared at nothing. My brain wouldn't work. I couldn't make sense of it. There had to be an explanation. Maybe he'd taken out the loan for an investment property and forgotten to tell me. Maybe it was some kind of tax thing I didn't understand. But even as I tried to convince myself, I knew. I knew something was very, very wrong. The email came through 20 minutes later. I opened the attachment, scanned through page after page of documents, loan agreements, disclosure forms, title paperwork, and then I saw it. My signature. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close. Close enough that someone who didn't know me well wouldn't notice. But I'd been signing my name the same way for 20 years. The loop on the R was different. The slant of the letters was off. Someone had forged my signature, and I knew exactly who. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there on the garage floor, holding letters written by a woman who thought she was waiting for my husband to choose her. A woman who had no idea she was part of a plan that had nothing to do with love. Because that's what I realized sitting there. Claire wasn't the end goal. She was just another piece. Michael didn't want to leave me for her. He wanted me gone. Completely. And he wanted everything I'd helped build to disappear with me. I put the letters back in the box. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I felt strangely calm. I went inside and opened my laptop. I searched for Claire's name. It took me less than 10 minutes to find her. She lived 3 hours away. She worked as a dental hygienist. Her social media was public. There were photos of her at restaurants at the beach, with friends. And there were photos of Michael. Not many, just enough. One from 2 years ago at a wine bar. One from a year and a half ago on a hiking trail. The captions were vague. Good company. Beautiful day. But I recognized his jacket in one photo, his watch in another. I scrolled further back. That's when I found the photo that broke something inside me. It was from 3 years ago. Claire was standing in front of a house, smiling. The caption read, "New Beginnings." I recognized the house. It was one of the properties mortgaged under my name. Michael had moved her into a house I was paying for. I closed the laptop. I walked into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked the same. Same face, same eyes, but I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. How had I been so stupid? How had I missed all of this? I started replaying every moment of the last few years in my mind. Every trip he'd taken, every late night at work, every time he'd told me he loved me. Had any of it been real? Or had I just been a bank account with a heartbeat? I thought about the mortgage broker we'd used when we bought our house. Michael had handled most of the paperwork. He'd said it was easier that way, less stressful for me. I'd signed where he told me to sign. I thought about the financial planner he'd insisted we meet with 2 years ago, the one who'd suggested we increase our life insurance policies. For security, he'd said, in case anything happened to either of us. I'd signed those papers too. I thought about the time last year when Michael had convinced me to add him as a co-owner on my retirement account. He'd said it would make things easier if something happened to me. That it was just smart planning. I'd signed that paperwork without even reading it. Every signature, every document, every decision I thought we were making together. He'd been setting it up, all of it, and I'd helped him do it. I felt sick. I called Patricia. She answered on the second ring. I told her about the letters, about Claire, about the house. There was a pause. "Rachel," she said carefully, "I need you to listen to me. This is more serious than I initially thought. We need to move quickly." I asked her what she meant. She explained that based on everything I'd told her, there was a pattern. Forged documents. Secret accounts. A girlfriend installed in a property under my name. A life insurance policy with false information. "This isn't just fraud," she said. "This looks like someone building a very specific kind of exit strategy." I told her I didn't understand. She was quiet for a moment. "I think he was planning to kill you, Rachel, or make it look like an accident, and I think he's been planning it for years." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was being dramatic, but I couldn't, because deep down, I knew she was right. Patricia told me to stay calm, to keep acting normal. She said she was going to contact a colleague who specialized in criminal fraud cases, that we needed to involve the authorities. I told her I would. But when I hung up, I didn't feel calm. I felt hollow. That night, Michael came home with flowers. He handed them to me with a smile and said he'd been thinking about me all day, that he wanted to do something nice. I thanked him. I put the flowers in a vase. We had dinner. We talked about nothing important. And the entire time, I kept thinking about the letters, about Claire, about the life insurance policy, about how easy it would be for him to make me disappear. After dinner, I excused myself and went upstairs. I locked the bedroom door. I opened my laptop and started going through our joint email account, the one Michael thought I never checked. I found an email from 8 months ago. It was from a travel agency. The subject line read, "Confirmation for Bahamas trip." I opened it. Michael had booked a trip for 2, first-class flights, a beachfront resort, 7 days. The dates matched the weekend he'd told me he had a work conference in Chicago. The reservation was under his name and someone listed as M. Stevens. I searched for M. Stevens in his emails. There were dozens of messages, casual, affectionate, but they weren't from Claire. This was someone else, a woman named Monica. I felt like I was falling. How many were there? I kept searching. I found another name, then another. Over the past 5 years, there had been at least 4 different women. Claire was just the one who'd stuck around the longest. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about money. This was a pattern. Michael had done this before. Maybe not the forgery. Maybe not the properties. But the lying. The double life. The manipulation. I opened a new search tab and typed in his full name along with the word marriage. I don't know what made me do it. Some instinct I should have trusted years ago. The results loaded. There was a marriage license from 15 years ago. Michael Stevens and Jennifer Caldwell. I clicked on the link. It was a public record from a county 2 states over. He'd been married before. He'd never told me. I searched for Jennifer Caldwell. It took a while, but I found an obituary. She'd died 7 years ago. Car accident. Single vehicle collision. She'd gone off the road late at night on a stretch of highway with no witnesses. The obituary mentioned she was survived by her parents. It mentioned a life insurance payout that went to her widower. I felt cold. I checked the date of her death. It was 6 months before Michael and I met. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark, trying to breathe. He'd done this before, and he was about to do it again. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Michael in the bed we'd shared for 12 years and watched him breathe. He looked peaceful, comfortable, like he had nothing to worry about. I wondered if Jennifer had lain next to him like this, if she'd trusted him the way I had, if she'd noticed the signs and ignored them, just like I did. I wondered if she'd realized what was happening before it was too late. The next morning, I got up before he did. I made coffee. I went through my normal routine. When Michael came downstairs, I smiled at him. He kissed me on the forehead and told me he had meetings all day. I told him I hoped they went well. He left at 7:30. The second his car pulled out of the driveway, I called Patricia. I told her what I'd found. The previous marriage, the dead wife, the insurance payout. She didn't sound surprised. "We need to move carefully," she said. "If we go to the police now, they'll investigate. But without hard evidence connecting him to her death, it'll be difficult to prove anything." I asked her what we should do. "We focus on what we can prove," she said. "The forgery, the fraud, the identity theft. We build a case that's airtight, and we let the authorities connect the dots on the rest." I told her I understood, but inside, I felt something shifting. I didn't just want him caught, I wanted him destroyed. Not physically, not violently, but I wanted everyone to see what he was. I wanted Claire to know. I wanted Monica and whoever else there was to know. I wanted his friends, his colleagues, everyone who thought he was a good guy to see the truth. I wanted him to lose everything the same way he'd planned for me to lose everything, but I had to be smart about it. Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. I documented everything. I took photos of documents when Michael wasn't home. I forwarded emails to a private account he didn't know about. I made copies of bank statements and property records. I created a timeline. Every lie, every trip, every forged signature. I contacted the insurance company and requested a full copy of my policy application. When it arrived, I compared the signature to samples of my real handwriting. The differences were subtle, but they were there. I reached out to Jennifer Caldwell's parents. I didn't tell them who I was at first. I just said I was researching a story about road safety and had come across their daughter's accident report. Her mother was kind, heartbroken, even after all these years. She told me Jennifer had been a careful driver, that she didn't understand how the accident had happened, that the police had said she'd likely fallen asleep at the wheel, but Jennifer had never been someone who drove when she was tired. I asked if she'd been under any stress before the accident. Her mother hesitated. Then she said Jennifer had seemed distant in the months before she died, that she'd mentioned some financial troubles, that her husband had been handling their money, and she'd felt confused about where everything was going. I thanked her for her time. I hung up and sat in my car, staring at nothing. It was the same pattern. He'd done this before, and he'd gotten away with it. I wasn't going to let him get away with it again, but I had to be patient. Patricia introduced me to a forensic accountant named David. Not the name I wanted to hear, but I pushed past it. He went through every document I'd given him, every bank statement, every property record. 2 weeks later, he handed me a report. Michael had defrauded me of over $300,000. That included the rental income, the equity in the properties, and several other financial transactions I hadn't even known about. The report was detailed, methodical, undeniable. Patricia filed a police report, then we waited. During that time, I kept living my normal life. I went to work. I came home. I had dinner with Michael. He had no idea. I watched him carefully now, looking for cracks, for signs of guilt or fear, but there was nothing. He was good at this. One night, he told me he loved me. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie. He said it out of nowhere, just looked over at me and said, "I love you. You know that?" I smiled and said I loved him too. And I felt nothing. That's when I knew I'd changed. I wasn't the woman who'd trusted blindly anymore. I wasn't the woman who'd believed love meant never questioning. I was someone colder now, harder. I didn't know if I liked who I was becoming, but I knew I couldn't go back. 3 weeks after I filed the report, 2 detectives showed up at my door. Michael wasn't home. He was at work. They asked if they could come in. I let them. They asked me about the properties, about the signatures, about my relationship with Michael. I answered every question calmly, clearly. I showed them the documents, the timeline, the forensic accountant's report. They took notes. They asked if I felt safe at home. I told them I did. I lied. They told me they'd be in touch, that they were opening an investigation. I thanked them. When they left, I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the door. This was it. There was no going back now. That night, Michael came home and asked how my day was. I told him it was fine. He didn't know the walls were closing in, but I did. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to control. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was building a case, piece by piece, signature by signature. I was taking back everything he'd stolen. And when it was done, everyone would know exactly who Michael Stevens really was. Not the charming husband, not the successful salesman, a liar, a fraud, a predator. I didn't need revenge to be loud. I just needed it to be thorough. And I had all the time in the world. The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, I lived in a strange kind of limbo. I went to work. I answered emails. I attended meetings. I pretended everything was normal. At home, I cooked dinner. I asked Michael about his day. I fell asleep next to him. But I was counting down, waiting for the moment when everything he'd built would fall apart. The first crack came on a Tuesday morning. Michael got a call while we were having breakfast. He looked at the screen, frowned, and stepped into the other room to answer it. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his voice changed. It got quieter, tighter. When he came back, his face was pale. He said it was nothing, just a work thing. I nodded and went back to my coffee, but I knew. That afternoon, Patricia called me. "The detective contacted the mortgage company," she said. "They've flagged all 3 properties for fraud investigation. Michael's going to be notified within the next few days." I asked her what that meant. "It means they're freezing the accounts, no more rental income, no more access to the equity, and they're going to require him to prove the signatures were legitimate." I felt something loosen in my chest. "He can't prove that," I said. No, Patricia agreed. He can't. 2 days later, Michael got a letter. I saw it on the kitchen counter when I got home from work. He'd opened it but left it sitting there. I picked it up. It was from the mortgage company, formal, legal. It informed him that due to suspected fraudulent activity, all accounts associated with the properties were being suspended pending investigation. It requested that he provide documentation proving authorization for all signatures on the original loan applications. I put the letter back down. When Michael came home that night, he didn't say anything about it, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept checking his phone, the way he poured himself a drink before dinner, which he rarely did. I asked if everything was okay. He said he was just stressed about work. I told him I understood. The next week, the police contacted Claire. I didn't know this was happening until Patricia told me, but apparently, during their investigation, they'd traced the rental payments and found her name on the lease agreements. They'd asked her to come in for an interview. Patricia's colleague had a contact in the department. He told her that Claire had been cooperative. Confused, but cooperative. She'd confirmed that Michael had told her the house was an investment property he owned, that he'd said he was separated from his wife and planning to file for divorce. She'd had no idea the property was mortgaged under someone else's name. When the detective told her the truth, she'd apparently sat in silence for a long time. Then she'd asked if she was in trouble. They told her no. She was a witness, not a suspect. But they did tell her that Michael Stevens was under investigation for fraud and identity theft. I wondered what her face looked like when she heard that. I wondered if she felt as stupid as I had. 3 days later, Claire called him. I know, because I heard his phone ring at 11 o'clock at night. He was in the bathroom. I saw her name on the screen before it stopped ringing. He called her back from his car the next morning. I watched from the window as he sat in the driveway, talking. Even from a distance, I could see the way his hands moved, sharp, defensive. When he came back inside, he was quiet. I didn't ask. But I knew she'd figured it out. The second crack came from his job. The company he worked for had a strict ethics policy. Any employee under investigation for fraud or financial crimes was required to report it to HR immediately. Michael didn't report it, but someone else did. I don't know who. Maybe Claire. Maybe someone from the police department. Maybe someone at the mortgage company. But 2 weeks after the investigation started, Michael's boss called him into a meeting. He came home that afternoon earlier than usual. He didn't say anything. He just went straight to his office and closed the door. I waited an hour before I knocked. He told me to come in. He was sitting at his desk, staring at nothing. I asked what happened. He said they'd put him on administrative leave, pending the outcome of an external review. I asked what that meant. He said it meant he wasn't fired yet, but he wasn't allowed to work either. I told him I was sorry. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you know anything about this?" My heart stopped. I kept my face neutral. "About what?" I asked. "The investigation," he said. "The mortgage company, the police. Someone reported me, Rachel." I met his eyes. "Why would someone report you?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He just turned back to his computer. I left the room. The third crack came from Monica. I didn't know about her involvement until Patricia told me the police had contacted her too. Apparently, Michael had used her name as a reference on one of the rental applications. When the investigator called her, she'd been confused. She'd confirmed she knew Michael, but said she had no knowledge of any properties. Then the investigator had asked her about the nature of her relationship with him. She'd hesitated. Then she'd told the truth. They'd been seeing each other on and off for 2 years. She'd thought it was casual. She hadn't known he was married. When the investigator informed her that he was, in fact, married, she'd gone silent. Then she'd asked for the detective's information and said she wanted to make a formal statement. Patricia told me Monica had emails, text messages, receipts from trips they'd taken together. She was willing to provide all of it. I felt a grim satisfaction hearing that, not because I wanted to hurt Michael, but because the truth was coming out, piece by piece, and he couldn't stop it. By the end of the month, everyone knew, his coworkers, his friends, the people he played golf with on weekends. I didn't have to say anything. The investigation was public record. People talked. I saw it in the way his friend Mark stopped calling, the way our neighbors looked at us differently when we were outside. Michael started spending more time in his office. He stopped going out. He barely spoke to me. I didn't push. I just waited, because I knew what was coming, and so did he. The formal charges came 3 months after I first saw that mortgage on my credit report. Fraud, identity theft, forgery on multiple legal documents. The prosecutor's office sent me a letter explaining what would happen next. There would be a trial. I would likely be called to testify. Patricia told me the evidence was overwhelming, that Michael's lawyer was already discussing a plea deal. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. Michael moved out 2 weeks before the court date. He didn't ask if he could stay. He didn't beg. He didn't even try to explain. He just packed his things one afternoon while I was at work and left. I came home to an empty closet and a note on the kitchen counter. It said, "I'm sorry." 2 words. After 12 years. I threw it away. The hearing was quiet, procedural. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched as Michael stood before the judge. His lawyer did most of the talking. Michael just stood there, expressionless. He pled guilty to 3 counts of fraud and 2 counts of identity theft. The judge asked if he understood the consequences. He said he did. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was ordered to pay full restitution. Every dollar he'd taken from me, every fraudulent charge, every forged signature. The properties were transferred back into my name legally. The rental income from the past 4 years was calculated and added to what he owed me. It would take years for me to see most of that money. Maybe I never would, but that wasn't the point anymore. When the judge dismissed the court, I stood up to leave. Michael turned around. Our eyes met for just a moment. I didn't see remorse. I didn't see guilt. I saw someone who'd been caught. Nothing more. I walked out of the courtroom and didn't look back. A few weeks later, I got a call from Jennifer Caldwell's mother. She'd seen the news coverage. A small article in the local paper about Michael's sentencing had mentioned his previous marriage. A journalist had done some digging. She told me she always knew something wasn't right about Jennifer's accident, that she'd felt it in her bones but couldn't prove anything. She said she was glad the truth finally came out, even if it was too late for her daughter. I told her I was sorry for her loss. She told me I was brave. I didn't feel brave. I just felt like someone who'd refused to disappear. Claire reached out to me once. It was an email. Short, awkward. She said she was sorry, that she'd had no idea, that she'd been lied to just like I had. I believed her, but I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I sold the house. I couldn't stay there. Every room reminded me of a life that had never been real. I bought a small condo across town, something that was just mine, something no one could take from me. I changed my locks, I changed my passwords, I changed my phone number. I started over. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if I'd missed something, if there was a moment I could have stopped it all from happening. But eventually, I stopped asking those questions, because the truth was, I couldn't have stopped it. Michael had been doing this long before he met me, and he would have kept doing it if I hadn't found out. Some people are just built that way. They see other people as tools, as resources, and when the tool stops being useful, they get rid of it. I was supposed to be disposed of, but I wasn't. I survived. A year after the sentencing, I was going through old boxes I'd kept in storage. I found our wedding photo. We looked happy, young, hopeful. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember what I'd felt that day. But I couldn't. That version of me didn't exist anymore. I thought about keeping it, for memory's sake. But then I realized I didn't want to remember. I didn't want to carry him with me anymore, so I threw it away. Not out of anger, not out of bitterness, just out of finality. I went back to work. I reconnected with old friends I'd drifted away from. I started going to therapy once a week. Slowly, I rebuilt. Not the life I'd had before. A different one where I trusted my instincts, where I paid attention to the details, where I didn't ignore the warning signs just because I wanted to believe in something. I learned that love isn't supposed to make you smaller. It's not supposed to make you doubt yourself, and it's definitely not supposed to erase you. I still think about Jennifer sometimes. I wonder if she felt what I felt in those final months, if she knew something was wrong but couldn't name it. I wonder if she fought back or if she just didn't have time. I'll never know. But I like to think that somewhere, somehow, she knows her story didn't end in silence, that the man who erased her didn't get away with it forever. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry, if I hate him, and the honest answer is no. I don't hate Michael. I don't feel anything for him at all. He's just a stranger I used to know, a man who tried to bury me and found out I was harder to kill than he thought. I'm not the same person I was when this started. I'm not softer, I'm not kinder, but I'm still here, and that's enough. My name is Rachel. I'm 38 years old, and I survived the man who tried to make me disappear.